Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that the Book of Mormon is a record of the ancient inhabitants of the Americas? Learn how several different prophets tell the story of a group of people who came from Jerusalem around 600 BC and later divided into two nations called the Nephites and the Lamanites. Learn that more than 200 million copies of the Book of Mormon have been printed and translated into more than 105 languages, and that the Book of Mormon is recognized as one of the 20 books that changed America.
Usually, when we talk about the launch of some massively influential publication today, there's this underlying expectation of a slick, well-funded infrastructure.
Oh, yeah, like huge publishing houses.
Right. Massive PR campaigns, millions of dollars in venture capital, just like waiting to push a product out into the world. It feels inevitable, like flipping a switch.
Right. It's totally calculated. It's a machine designed to, eliminate friction.
Exactly. It's clean, it's organized, it is heavily financed. But then you step back into the world of early 19th century America.
Yeah.
And you look at the origins of a text that would actually go on to shape a global religion, and suddenly that well-oiled machine is it's completely non-existent.
It's gone.
We're looking at a logistical and, a financial landscape that is honestly incredibly precarious. It's the absolute definition of a high wire act without a net.
And that high wire act is exactly what we're unpacking today. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the fascinating origins, the monumental logistical hurdles, and the immense, frankly, staggering legacy of the publication of the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
We're going to map out exactly what it took to get this book out of a local print shop and into the world.
But before we get into the weeds of 1830s publishing, it's really important that we establish our framework for this discussion.
Right, absolutely.
Because the historical texts and records we're exploring today, they contain very specific, deeply held religious claims. Things like the book confirming the divinity of the Savior and the assertion that it was written by ancient prophets through the spirit of prophecy and revelation.
Yeah.
And we want to be crystal clear right out of the gate here. We are not here to take a theological stance on those beliefs, one way or the other. We aren't endorsing them, nor are we attempting to debunk them.
Exactly. Our goal is to impartially examine what the material states about the text itself and to map out the historical, boots-on-the-ground journey of getting it printed.
Right.
So let's set the scene with some foundational facts. The Book of Mormon was first printed and offered for sale on March 26, 1830.
Okay.
This happened in Palmyra, New York, and the complete title of the work is The Book of Mormon, Another Testament of Jesus Christ.
March 26, 1830. Just, hold that date in your mind.
Yeah.
Now, if you are listening to this and you follow this topic, you're likely already familiar with the massive scope of the narrative itself.
Oh, yeah. The lore.
You know the lore.
Mm.
It is presented as a volume of Holy Scripture recording God's dealings with the ancient inhabitants of the Americas.
Right. It details two massive, distinct migrations. You have the first group that left Jerusalem in 600 BC, which eventually split into the Nephites and the Lamanites.
Right.
And then you have that much earlier migration, the Jaredites, who arrive at the time when the Lord confounded the tongues at the Tower of Babel.
Right. And over thousands of years, these groups are ultimately destroyed, with the exception of the Lamanites, who are described as being among the ancestors of the American Indians.
Exactly.
And look, we don't need to rehash the entire theological timeline here, but you really have to keep that sprawling, multi-generational epic in your head to understand the sheer physical hurdle of what comes next.
Oh, for sure.
Because it's like trying to pitch, a dense, multi-century historical chronicle spanning continents and civilizations.
Yeah, it's huge.
Which brings me to the pivotal question. How does one man, Joseph Smith, in 1830s rural America, take this incredibly complex narrative, which, he states he translated from ancient gold plates, and turn it into a physical printed reality?
Honestly, it's a logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
The grand scale of that ancient narrative was just immediately on a collision course with the mundane, highly expensive, and technologically limited reality of 1830s publishing.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the sheer audacity of the plan is just wild to me. Yeah. Joseph Smith is described as the translator and an instrument in the hands of God. But being an instrument of God doesn't exempt you from the bureaucratic red tape of 19th century copyright law.
It certainly does not.
Right.
To protect the work, Smith first had to obtain a copyright.
Right.
And in 1830, you didn't just, slap a symbol on a page and call it a day.
Oh.
He had to physically file a printed copy of the title page with the federal district court clerk.
And as anyone who has ever dealt with legal filings knows, that bureaucracy costs money.
Yeah, exactly.
Money that Joseph Smith simply did not have. I mean, he was a poor farmer. Yet, despite having basically zero capital, once he secures the copyright, he makes a decision about the print run that absolutely baffles me.
Oh, the 5,000 copies.
Yes, he doesn't just want to print a few copies for his immediate followers, to test the waters. He plans a first run of 5,000 copies.
Which is staggering when you look at the mechanics of the era. 5,000 copies was twice the average book printing at the time.
Twice the average.
Yeah, a highly successful, established author might command a run of maybe 2,500 copies.
Oh.
So for a first-time publisher with no funds, to demand double the industry average is almost unheard of. And, we really have to talk about how a book was actually made back then to understand why printers were terrified of this job.
Yes, please, because I think we take for granted how easy it is to print something today.
Yeah.
Like, you hit a button and a laser printer spits out 100 pages in 2 minutes.
Exactly. In 1830, typesetting was entirely manual.
Oh, man.
A compositor had to pick up individual metal letters, punctuation marks, and spaces one by one and place them backward into a frame.
Backward, right.
Yeah. For a book over 500 pages long, you are talking about hundreds of thousands of individual pieces of lead. And the materials.
The paper, right.
Yeah, paper wasn't made from cheap wood pulp yet. It was made from cotton and linen rags, which were incredibly expensive to source in massive quantities.
Not to mention binding 5,000 heavy volumes in, calfskin or sheepskin? You are talking about a massive supply chain issue, just for the raw materials alone.
Precisely. It would completely monopolize a printer's press for months. They wouldn't be able to take on local newspapers, broadsides, or pamphlets, the reliable jobs that actually kept their lights on.
Right.
So it is no wonder that 3 different printers flat out rejected him.
But wait, let me push back on that for a second.
Sure.
If I'm a printer in 1830, say I'm Egbert B. Grandin, and I run a business, if this guy wants to tie up my shop for half a year, but the money is guaranteed, why do I care? Was it purely the financial risk of the raw materials, or was there something else?
Well, there were 3 distinct walls they hit. The first 2 were, like we said, the sheer expense of the upfront capital for the paper and ink, and then the technical capacity of a rural shop to handle that volume.
Okay.
But the third reason was entirely social.
The religious stigma.
Exactly.
Right.
These printers had their own religious misgivings, and they had to protect their reputations.
Right, small town.
Yeah, they were being asked to print a massive book claiming to be new scripture, translated from ancient plates, detailing civilizations that nobody in their immediate circles had ever heard of.
Yeah.
For conservative businessmen in 1830s upstate New York, taking on that project was highly controversial. If the local community boycotted your shop because they thought you were printing blasphemy, your business was dead.
Okay, so you have this basically insurmountable wall of financial, technical, and social risk. 3 printers say no. Finally, Egbert B. Grandin says yes to the 5,000 copy run, but he demands an absolute ironclad guarantee.
Right.
And this is where the project requires someone to step up and risk their literal livelihood.
Yeah.
Enter Martin Harris.
Martin Harris is such a crucial figure here. He is noted in the text as being one of the 3 witnesses to the book's divinity.
Yeah.
And we should probably contextualize why witnesses mattered so much.
Yeah, why was that a thing?
Well, in 19th century America, personal reputations and sworn affidavits functioned as social currency. If you had no money and no established credibility, you needed respected members of the community to publicly stake their honor on your claim.
It was basically the 1830s equivalent of a verified blue check mark.
Yeah.
But, with actual real-world consequences.
Wow.
So Martin Harris, this respected witness, steps up to secure the agreement with Grandin. And he doesn't just co-sign a loan.
No, he does not.
He mortgages his house and part of his farm to pay for the project.
What's fascinating here is the sheer mechanics of that risk. He is literally tying his survival to a printing press.
I try to think of a modern equivalent. It's like renting out an entire manufacturing plant for 6 months to build a single, completely unproven prototype.
That's a great way to put it.
And if nobody buys that prototype, the factory owner and the backer both go bankrupt.
Right.
Harris was acting like a modern-day angel investor. But he wasn't a Silicon Valley billionaire playing with disposable income.
Right.
He mortgaged the dirt he plowed and the roof over his family's head.
It is hard to overestimate the value of that sacrifice. And to help him repay this massive, life-altering debt, Joseph Smith gave Harris the right to sell the 5,000 copies straight out of Grandin's print shop.
But here is the devastating twist, and honestly the deep irony of this whole story.
Hmm.
You'd think, okay, the book gets printed, the local community is curious, it sells out, Harris makes his money back, and history is made.
Yeah, a clean ending.
But that's not what happened at all.
Not at all. The commercial reality of a 5,000 copy print run in a rural area hit them incredibly hard. The initial sales were poor.
Wow.
There simply wasn't enough local demand to move that kind of massive inventory quickly enough to satisfy the debt.
That financial ruin Harris faced was all over a physical object, just a stack of printed paper.
Yeah.
Because of those poor initial sales, Harris ultimately had to sell his house and 151 acres of his farm to pay off the massive debt to the printer. 151 acres. Gone.
It's staggering.
For a project that would eventually print hundreds of millions of copies globally. The initial backer lost his working farm because he couldn't move the inventory in rural New York. It's a sobering reminder of the very real, very heavy toll that history takes on the individuals living through it.
It really is. And that financial fragility, it actually extended directly to the physical manuscripts themselves, which makes it even more baffling how they treated the original handwritten manuscript just a decade later.
Yes. Let's talk about the manuscript because this genuinely blew my mind.
It's a wild story.
During the printing process, Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery, who was another of the three witnesses, right?
Correct.
They were incredibly careful. They kept the original manuscript safe, and Cowdery painstakingly wrote out an entire second copy specifically for the printer to use.
Right, the printer's manuscript. And the logic was sound, you know? A 19th century print shop was a chaotic, ink-stained, dirty place.
Right, super messy.
Pages could easily be lost, torn, or ruined, so you keep the original secure and only send the working copy to Grandin's shop.
Exactly. They treat it like the priceless artifact it is. But then, fast forward to 1841, the movement has grown there in Nauvoo, Illinois, and Joseph Smith has this original foundational manuscript.
The original where?
The core document of the entire religion. And what does he do with it? He places the original manuscript into the hollowed-out cornerstone of a building called the Nauvoo House.
Now, to modern ears, placing a stack of paper into a stone cavity in a building foundation sounds like a recipe for absolute disaster.
It sounds insane. I am totally baffled by this. You take your most valuable founding document and you put it inside a hollow, damp rock.
Yeah.
It's like putting the Declaration of Independence in a cardboard box
Right.
and leaving it in a rainstorm. I mean, why on earth would they do that?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of 19th century culture, it actually makes sense conceptually, even if it was scientifically flawed.
Okay.
In the 1800s, cornerstones functioned like sacred time capsules. It was a highly commemorative practice to take your most prized foundational documents and seal them in the foundation of a significant building. The intent was to protect them for future generations or the millennium. They viewed the stone as a vault.
Okay, so the intent was preservation. They just didn't understand the chemistry of condensation and porous limestone.
Precisely. They didn't anticipate moisture seeping into the stone cavity. And tragically, the inevitable happened. The original manuscript suffered extensive water damage in that cornerstone.
Ugh, that's rough.
Decades later, when it was finally recovered, only about 28% of it had survived.
Wow. Only 28%.
Yeah. That surviving 28% is now held at the Church History Library.
And it just highlights how fragile history really is. We think of these massive global movements as being set in stone, no pun intended, but their founding documents were literally dissolving in a damp cornerstone.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they still had that printer's copy.
Yes, they did. Shortly before his death in 1850, Oliver Cowdery gave the surviving printer's manuscript to David Whitmer, who was the third of the three witnesses. And that surviving printer's manuscript provides historians today with unparalleled insight into the actual process of translating and producing the text.
But to understand why these physical pages mattered so much to early followers, like why they bothered putting them in cornerstones or keeping them safe for decades, we have to look at how Joseph Smith himself framed the text.
Right.
He didn't just view it as a helpful historical guide.
Not at all. He tied the entire legitimacy of his movement to the physical reality of this book. He stated, "The Book of Mormon is true, just what it purports to be, and for this testimony I expect to give an account in the day of judgment."
He went even further than that. He told his followers that it was the most correct of any book on earth and the keystone of our religion, and a man would get nearer to God by abiding its precepts than by any other book.
And perhaps the most telling quote regarding how central this physical object was to the faith. He said, "Take away the Book of Mormon and the Revelations, and where is our religion? We have none."
Where is our religion? We have none. He is anchoring the entire theological weight of the movement onto this one specific 500-page printed object.
Exactly.
Which makes the contrast between its fragile, chaotic beginnings and what it eventually became absolutely staggering. You have a waterlogged original manuscript, you have bankrupting early sales, a farmer losing 151 acres, and yet the story obviously doesn't end in 1830s obscurity.
Far from it.
Ugh.
The trajectory of the book shifted dramatically because the distribution method changed.
Right.
It shifted from a stagnant, localized inventory problem in Palmyra to a decentralized grassroots network. Missionaries literally carried copies of the book in their saddlebags across the country and eventually across oceans to preach what they called the message of the restored gospel.
Right. Instead of waiting for upstate New York farmers to wander into Grandin's shop, they took the physical book directly to the people.
Exactly.
And as it spread, the scale of its impact grew exponentially. Remember the Grandin building, the very print shop where Martin Harris financed those first 5,000 copies and nearly lost everything.
Oh, yes. In a fascinating historical full circle moment, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints actually purchased that building in 1978.
Wow.
2 decades later, in 1998, they dedicated the Grandin building as the Book of Mormon historic publication site.
So it transforms from a site of intense financial stress, technical bottlenecks, and local rejection into a dedicated historic monument.
Yeah.
And the numbers today are just hard to wrap your head around. From that initial, incredibly risky print run of 5,000 copies that wouldn't sell, currently, more than 200 million copies of the Book of Mormon have been printed.
200 million, and it has been translated into more than 105 languages.
That's crazy.
It has even been recognized as one of the 20 books that changed America. What's fascinating here is how a hyper-localized project that struggled to even secure a printer successfully scaled into a global phenomenon.
It is an unbelievable journey. So let's trace the path we just walked. We started with a text claiming an epic, ancient origin golden plates, the Tower of Babel, 600 BC migrations.
Right.
We watched that massive, sprawling narrative smash headfirst into the mundane, bureaucratic reality of a federal district court clerk and a rural printing press.
Mm-hmm.
We explored the mechanics of 19th century publishing and saw Martin Harris lose 151 acres of his farm to fund it.
Mm-hmm.
We learned about the fragile original manuscript nearly rotting away in a waterlogged Nauvoo cornerstone because of a well-intentioned preservation practice. And finally, we tracked its explosion into a global publication with over 200 million copies in print.
It leaves you with a profound sense of the precariousness of history. And it actually raises an interesting question when you look at the modern era.
Oh, how so?
Today, in the digital age, you can publish a manifesto or a founding document globally with a single click. There is zero physical cost, zero supply chain bottleneck, and no need to mortgage a farm to secure a printing press.
That's a really good point. The friction is completely gone.
Exactly, but it makes you wonder, does the ease of modern publishing make it easier for new beliefs and movements to spread, or does the lack of a physical mortgage the farm sacrifice make modern movements inherently more fleeting?
Oh, wow.
The Book of Mormon survived its incredibly fragile infancy largely because the early friction was so high that it demanded absolute life-altering commitment from people like Martin Harris. Or, what if Egbert Grandin had been the fourth printer to say no?
Right.
If publishing had been easy, effortless, and risk-free, would the resulting movement have been as enduring? It's a compelling paradox to consider. Sometimes the sheer difficulty of creating a physical object is what cements its legacy.
Wow. The idea that the friction itself is what built the foundation.
Yeah.
That is going to stick with me. It all comes back to that initial launch. We expect the well-oiled machine, the flawless digital infrastructure. But history is made in the messy, risky, physical moments. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been an absolute pleasure unpacking this incredible historical journey with you, and we will catch you on the next one.
Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.